How do I manage my Indiana real estate portfolio from another state? I'm buying houses from out of state. This is our series on how to buy, invest in real estate as an out of state real estate investor, turn $200,000 into $100,000 a month passive income forever. I'm Oz the Mail, is my good friend Joe Cromp. We're going to talk about this. So, Joe, how do you manage a portfolio from a different state? What's the
Well,
biggest fear?
well, first of all, I've owned properties in many states in this union, and so much of the fear around this is pretty unfounded once you uh, deal with these issues. So the biggest fear I think is not being there to fix the problem. If you're not there to fix the problem, uh, how is it going to get fixed? Well, you're going to have somebody do that work for you. Not being able to check up on the people who are working for you, not knowing the areas that you're in. One block may be great where another block may be terrible just right down the street, a place you don't ever want to go to. Real estate's really a very local business. If you don't know the area, you need someone who knows that area, someone who knows it intimately to be able to work with. So you've got to have those things you got to have a good managing person there to be able to handle that portfolio and be able to manage it remotely easier and more efficiently and safer.
Okay. So, what are some of the steps we can do to? I think we have 5 steps here in your notes here. What are some of the steps we can do to make sure that this is less of an issue?
Step one, lease option the property, make the renter the owner. Because when you do
Yes.
that, you almost don't need a property manager. We still use them. It still makes sense to have them there because there's going to be vacancies. But while that person is there, the manager has to do a whole lot less when they feel like they're the owner. I've talked about this before. You don't wash a rental car. You take care of the car that you own. You wash the car that you own. You take care of the property that you own, and you're a lot more likely to want to make sure that any repairs you do. And the other thing with lease options, we make the tenants responsible for the repairs. So we ask them to take care of all those things. So the manager doesn't even have to get involved most of the time. So
Mhm.
lease option of the property, making that person an owner is really step one. Step
Okay.
two, step two.
Yeah.
You got something to add to that?
No, no, it's good.
Okay, step two. Competent property manager. Even though you may not need a property manager if you lease option property, a good property manager is probably more important than a good property. They can fix most any problem if they're experienced and if they know what they're doing and they treat your people fairly and they have the same mindset that you have. You got to come into this understanding what's going to be needed. And if you don't know it, they better know it. So that means that they need to have the right policies, the right standard operating procedures. They've got to have the right checklists. They've got to have what we call the safe house checklist to be able to really understand what needs to be done as a property manager, filling those properties, maintaining those properties, managing those properties, and getting those properties back when that tenant leaves and you put somebody new in there. So those are all the things. And then on top of that, making sure that they do their bookkeeping properly. Uh, One of the problems I've had with property managers in the past is them not doing their bookkeeping properly
Yeah.
and not making their payments to me,
Yeah.
when they're supposed to, or not being able to collect the rent properly, or letting a tenant stay in too long after they, haven't made their payments, or not collecting, late fees, or doing the things that you have to do in order to maintain the business and make it grow.
Yeah, when you said it, almost like you don't have to have a property manager. The thing is, the tenant has to have a good relationship with somebody. And so if you're manager from out of state and it's not you, which you don't want it to be, that's where the property manager comes in play, where it's not just that they can manage the property, but they know how they're people, right? It's a people person. They want to hear about they want to hear about these people. They want to know what's going on in their lives and want to help them because the tenant, if there's a slight problem, even if there's some noise on the roof or there's something over here, you want to hear about it as soon as possible. They need to have some tunnel of communication that they have with property managers. So that makes a big difference. And so even though we're doing lease options, even though they are buyers, we do want to make sure they have somebody they can talk to when there's an issue. And also, it helps them understand a good property manager also has contacts with local rehabbers, local contractors. So if they do have to get work done, they can help them get good pricing and help them know what to buy and what to pay for, what's a good price. So what about the next part here about making it run? When you said the finances, we didn't talk about this as much, but that is so important just to keep your optimism up. Because when you spend, if you get hit with 4 grand or something, it's like it's easy to get a little down about that. But if you look at the overall bigger picture, it's like, you know what, it hasn't cost you anything for 3 years. You think, okay, well, and then you look at your equity, you look at your pay down, you start looking at the numbers. It's very easy to get excited when you have a good accountant who's reporting good numbers to you, and you can keep that excitement that helps you with further acquisitions. So how do you set that up to do it to run an autopilot? Or how important is that?
The
How,
the you're talking about the bookkeeping part of it, and
all of it, the setting it up properly, the third step here.
oh, okay. So that it runs on autopilot. All right.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta have systems. You gotta have policies that your management team follows, that they understand. And you just gotta let them do their job and get out of their way.
Yeah.
When a property manager, my property manager calls me and says, we need to do this, I say, thanks for letting me know. And then they go do it. And if it's money that I have to pay because maybe it's more money than we brought in that month, then I have my bookkeeper send them a check. They send me an invoice and we send them a check, and we pay for it. But when we look at the bottom line, because every year, my bookkeeper sits down and does P&L on every LLC that I own, and we look at those properties. We look at how they're performing. We look at which ones are making money and which ones have cost us money that year. And if the more properties you have in your portfolio, the easier it is to deal with problems like this. Because if you have one property and it's vacant, that you've got 100% vacancy. Your
Yeah.
vacancy rate's 100%. If you've got 100 properties and one of them vacant, then you got a 1% vacancy. We typically run with a 3% vacancy rate in my properties. The worst time in the history of me doing this, in the last since 1986, since for me doing this, the worst vacancy rate that I've ever had is went up to 20%. And that was in 2008 when everything crashed. And all those people, all those tenants lost their jobs, and they didn't have any money. They had to move out. So it took us, 3, 4, 5, 6 months sometimes to get them out and get them refilled. We'd have to clean them up and get them refilled. So there was expense in cleaning them up. There was expense in refilling them. That was a painful year because of that hit, because we still had mortgages to pay and all that. But I also had reserves because I saw this coming. I lived through the crash in 91,
Yeah.
and that crash in 91 took me down with it, took me and my whole portfolio down at the time, and I had to rebuild it from scratch. And this time, when 2003 and 4 and 5 came around, I knew we were on a bubble because it was just like what was happening in the late 80s. And I knew we were on a bubble, and I knew it was just a matter of time before it happened. And I was amazed that it didn't happen until 2008. We
Yeah.
knew that just like right now, we're kind of on a bubble. So
Yeah.
eventually it's going to happen. So how soon is that going to be? Is it going to be a year from now? Is it going to be 5 years from now? Nobody really knows, and a lot of different factors impact that. But but um, but I'm also ready for it. I've got reserves. I've got, if I need to make the payments on these mortgages for a while, that'll happen. And I also have a pretty good idea that if the worst happened, which was 2008, if the worst happened, and I get 20% vacancy, it's not really going to be the end of the world for me. So I think that you need to look at what you've got, look at what kind of reserves you need to keep for every property that you buy, And if you put some money aside and just let that money sit there in the bank, liquid and available, so that you can spend it when you need to, it will end up, making your life a lot less painful, and you'll have a lot more comfort in that process. So I think the thing to remember, this is a business. Make sure that whoever you hire, treats it like a business. Make sure that they pay attention. Yeah. One of the beauties of real estate, I think, is the transparency in it. You don't get that if you invest in the stock market. I mean, you buy a stock, you have no idea what those guys are doing with your money. You have no control over it. You can't step in if there's a problem. There's no
Yeah.
hard asset that keeps its value, even if they completely screw it up. It's just all sort of smoke and mirrors. But real estate's a fixed asset that'll be there, into the next century, or more. And you'll be able to continue to go back to the well, and you'll be able to see where the problems are. And I think sometimes being able to have that transparency creates stress in itself. But I don't know that that's bigger stress than seeing the market fluctuate and not have any control over it. At least this, you have control over it. If your property manager is not doing a good job, you can boot them and get somebody else to do the job for you. And or the tenant's not making their payments, you boot them and put somebody else in there, and you can stop the bleeding and get it back on track a lot easier.
Yeah. So what there's you made a note here about do your research. I think that's what you just covered. Then experience working with out of state, when it worked and when it didn't. Being an out of state landlord. By the way, Joe Crump and I was mail here. Our experience is over 50 years on our team. It's over 100 years. We've done hundreds, thousands of deals. But really, the most important reason why should you listen to us is because the outcomes. We have thousands of success stories in 15, 20 different countries and around the world, from people going from 0 to 10, 20, 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand a month and beyond. When it comes to this process of helping people create a passive income, helping them create buying and selling, creating equity with real estate and businesses. Nobody on earth has more success stories than we do. So you want to check that out. We all this project is about our safe house project, the GRS, get rich slow, turning 200K into 100K a month passive income forever. Takes bad news is it takes 10 to 15 years and you make no money in the meantime. The good news is you don't need to do anything or even leave your house. So that's why you should listen to us. What makes us so smart. And so what was our experience? I guess when you made a note here, the experience of working out of state, when did it work and when did it not? Or what would you say that this is about somebody who's managing something out of state? So what should they look out for?
Well, let's just compare and contrast, buying properties in, say, Dallas, Fort Worth, in Texas, or
Yeah.
maybe Spartanburg, South Carolina. These were local markets that I bought into, that were easy to manage. They were suburban markets. They went up in value. They had good rents. They were big enough so that I could hire local property managers that would take care of it, and that did a good job. So all those things, those types of areas had. Indianapolis is one of those markets. There's other things about Indianapolis that I think are better than Texas or South Carolina, although I think those areas are good too. But Indianapolis, is where I live. So I have, intimate knowledge of this town, and the many properties that we manage and work with here. But then you've got other areas that maybe are more challenging, that, like, doing some stuff in say Detroit, and there's areas of Detroit that are absolutely great investments, but
Yeah.
I bought some properties for like $500 per house in very challenging areas. So I bought like a group
Yeah.
of 10 of them, and in a very challenging area. And what I did was turn around and flip those properties on lease with an option. So we'd sell them for, $20,000 on terms with $1,000 down. So we'd get basically our $500 back, and we'd make $500, and then we'd get somebody making payments of $300 a month, from sort of then on. And that way we didn't have to rehab the houses, and But those were really challenging areas because it was hard to get property managers in those areas. It was hard to get people, tenants, to take those properties because they were in such bad condition, to take them and care for them and fix them up and make them homes. And I felt like a slumlord, and I didn't like it. I did the same thing in Cleveland, where I bought. It was just pretty much at the same time. I bought like 10 in Cleveland and 10 in Detroit. And, I just wanted to see because these properties were available at the time. I thought, oh, let's give it a try. And, and I made my money back. But the headaches of dealing with those properties were so great that it wasn't worth it. And I learned some hard lessons. I think Osm says, you don't want to have to send in SEAL Team 6 to collect your rent, you
Yeah.
know. And and actually in Detroit, there was a guy that stopped paying, and he said, "Well, you got to move out then," and he burned down the house.
Ah,
So, and they weren't insurable. The houses weren't
ah.
insurable.
Yeah, I'll
And,
show
and if
you.
you drive down that street, you'll find multiple burned down houses on the same street.
Multiple
So
evictions, right?
it wasn't the first. It wasn't the first house that he's
Yeah.
burned.
So he did not concur. That's the legal way of saying, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
eviction? Okay, okay. He sends you a picture of his house. Yeah,
it's,
that stuff happens. We bought and we've done deals also together, and like Vegas, and we bought some together, some that I did separately, Vegas, Florida. And you try to go in these hot areas. I was buying in Mesa, Arizona in 2005, right when it was the hottest market in the country, 30%, where you could buy a new construction house, and by the time the house was done, you could flip it for a profit. And you could do that for such a decent profit. There were people even leaving houses vacant, empty for months because builders said, okay, you can't sell the house within 6 months. And it made sense just to hold the house empty for 6 months and sell it. You could make money doing that. And that's basically the equivalent of that is crypto, when people are just trying to make quick money. And so over time, we don't invest in Indiana because we're in Indiana. We are now in the Indianapolis market is a good market, and that's why we recommend doing it because we've been to these different markets, hot markets, dead markets, and in between markets. And Indianapolis is a perfect mix. And you really, if you're imagine from out of state, you need to have people who are obsessed with that local market. If you're managing it, when we look, because we look at Detroit's actually, Detroit's an interesting place because when you're talking about was when the time they had the food deserts, when they just started, when they're having, they're looking at all sorts of healthcare costs went through the roof. We had a few properties out there that got bought by medical groups so they could practice, they were doing hypertension and different kinds of cholesterol reduction, cholesterol treatments because there was such a spike in the need for healthcare because it turned into a food desert in Detroit, which lasted up until a few years ago, I think, where there was no, it means basically there's no big box, no grocery stores in the entire city. And so the only way people are getting food is from gas stations. So imagine if your entire diet is from a gas station, like everything, like, that's like your grocery shopping at the same place you buy gas. And so they had all kinds of health issues that came up, strokes and heart disease and emphysema and all kinds of problems that were happening on a large scale. And you might not think, what does that have to do with real estate? Well, a lot, because no one wants to move there. No investors were going in there. Nobody, no businesses are going there. There has to be some government intervention, but now the government, why do they want to get? There's nothing to invest in. And so that was the first time I ever had hospitals contact us for turning single family residentials into like healthcare facilities. And at that time, of course, we're buying for cheap prices because nobody else is dumb enough to buy there. We've had a lot of experience of managing properties out of state and well, okay. So are you done with your part? Well, Joe and I split up these questions. So is that your part? Does that cover your
Yeah,
part?
one more thing. I mean, as
Yeah,
long as you're talking about Detroit, Detroit went from 3 million people down to 1 million people,
yeah.
because of the steel industry and the car industry. And so all these vacant houses, and one of the things that the city of Detroit has done to solve some of these problems is start tearing down houses. So they just go into the communities and just bulldoze these areas and open up green spaces. And it's been a real boon for the communities to be
Inner
able to do.
city farms. Yeah, yeah.
And so, instead of having, if you call the police in some of these areas in Detroit, they're not coming that day. You know, they might drive by tomorrow, but they're not
Mhm.
coming. They're not going to deal with it, and so there's no protection there, and so those are really challenging areas, and they need government intervention in order to be able to thrive again, because they definitely could thrive. They're in areas that you know, could be very nice.
Yes. Yeah, so there are some, we do the inner city gardens. We have a whole model on that. We did does some of these in Indianapolis where they're turning able to have sustenance farming. We try to promote veganism whenever we can, and it's a good way of there's some really there's some turnaround success stories there. So we will talk more about that later. But there are some or I guess we can get into that stuff later, but there are some real, when you're buying a house and you're the only one on the block that's, paying your rent, or, that's trying to do something, it's not a good sign. But the point is, we've had experience in areas like that. So that's not what this is about. We should probably not talk too much about these like horror stories. This is about how do you avoid that from happening? How do you get like actually, uh, and really, I guess you would need someone that has the experience we have. So I guess we should talk about that because
Yeah, I think maybe what we're saying is we've done everything. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
we've got like Osm said, we got 100 years worth of experience here, just between the two of us, practically. No, not between the two of us, but between us and the
on
team.
our team, yeah.
And when you and we've tried everything, because you know, we're entrepreneurs. We're always looking for the next thing. What's going to work? What's going to work?
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing is we set up businesses, we set up systems, we let them go on to autopilot, and then we move on to the next thing and build the next thing, and then we build the next thing, and we're builders, and um, that's what's exciting about this business for me. You know, what is the next thing? What can I build next? And I mean, that's why we're doing this right now.
Yeah, when we're talking about owning real estate out of the state, that ain't no thing, man. The things we've done, at least on our team, like I've been more, my stomach is a little more, I have more of a stomach for that because we've done deals overseas, buying places like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and over there, it's like you got to pay a mini army just to protect your land there. So that I've learned the importance of having, you have to build a team up. So that's the Joe's answer. Here's my answer for this: how to manage a portfolio from another state. So there's a quote here from Phil Stutz that I think is pretty applicable to this. Your infinite potential exists outside your comfort zone. We love pain, uncertainty, and hard work. Our culture denies the nature of reality. It holds out a promise that you can live in an ideal world where things come easily, a world in which unpleasant experiences can be avoided, where there's never a lack of immediate gratification. Worse, it suggests that if you do not live in this world, something is wrong with you. This ideal world is a realm of illusion. No matter how promising this world seems, it does not exist. So this idea of immediate gratification is the main reason I underline this. And I thought about this is exactly what the difference is between the landlords, the real estate investors who make it, and the ones that don't. It is how soon do you need to be gratified? How soon do you need to see a return? The longer you're okay with not seeing that return, the more that you can focus on the long term, the better off you're going to be. So I think the first step in managing anything overseas or anything outside your area is to keep a long term view in mind. A couple things here. We use the asset blueprint a lot, where it's you, then there's an asset, then there's your management. If you get those things in line, you're always going to make money. You need to have the asset, the real estate, but you need to have the management in place. And how to get the best management. A couple of notes here, the three top things we look at, because this is what you need to have. You have assets, you're buying safe houses in this case, you're buying whatever in another state, Indiana, Indianapolis, we're assuming. You need to get management. These three things, if you got these three things done, you'd have a good management so that they can manage your asset for you. Number one is that success has to be clearly defined. When I say we've just said $200,000 turns into 100K passive forever, that's the kind of sentence you want to hear. You want one sentence. What is the point of me working with you? When people do property management or asset management, or we help you manage an Indiana house or Indianapolis houses, if they don't have success clearly defined, what that means is that it really their idea of success and yours could be wildly different, and you have to be on the same page. Your management needs to know exactly what they're doing and what outcome do they create for their clients. Is it that they can just manage a property? Because anybody can do that. And if they're not making repairs based on you owning it forever, if they're not screening tenants based on you owning it forever, if they're not making financial decisions like the financing of it, how to pay off accelerated mortgages, for example, if they're not making these It's totally different if they're looking at it with, okay, this is a forever investment, this is a forever client, this is someone we want to build a long-term relationship with. They're going to make much different, much better decisions based on that, on what they think success is. So when we say 200K, turn 200K a month, 200K total into 100K passive forever, it takes 10 to 15 years, and you don't do anything in the meantime, but you're not going to make any money. When we work with somebody, we ask ourselves immediately, is this somebody we see ourselves working with for 10 or 15 years and beyond? And we have success clearly defined in one sentence. There's a lot more that goes into that one sentence than just the management. You were saying so,
I
yeah,
don't mean to break into your flow
yeah,
here, but
sure.
throw across the screen the URL where we explain how that $200,000 investment works and
Yeah.
how those numbers work. So put this
Yeah, so
URL.
good. The first link below. Just click the first link below. But yeah, yeah, you want to check that out because this is, I think if I was to say one, because one of the top things, I've been talking to a lot of investors lately. I've had more conversations individually, and I cold call myself. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love doing it, and I teach all our kids to do it too. It's one of the most important things you can do, especially when you talk to a stranger you've never talked to before, has no idea. They don't know I'm a legend, right? They don't know anything. When I tell them my name, I have to say it like 10 times and no one ever gets it the first time. But when I love talking to people for the first, when they're raw, and I ask them, what would you, because almost everyone has problems or has issues with their management, or if they're getting into real estate, they don't understand the management part of what to look for. And I always ask them, what do you think success looks like? And if you push them, very rarely do people have one sentence of success. They don't have that for themselves. Like, oh, I want to make 30 grand a month in real estate passive, for example. Just saying that gives you a lot of power. But once you have that, you'll see that very few people can deliver that. Very few people are ability to have the ability to create that outcome. So get success clearly defined. That's number one, to get the best management. One sentence defined. Number two is look for a nobody mountain. You want to see people, we call it nobody mountain. It's an accumulation of resources, education, effort that nobody else is willing to do. These videos are a good example. Go to my site, go to Big Ria, go to Joe's site. You'll see more. I mean, when nobody is even close to the level of resource that we provide. And then most importantly, the third thing is the outcomes. You need to see when you're talking to a management or any group, you need to see someone that has the outcomes, the exact outcomes that you want. Don't work with someone that says, oh, we do turnkey investing or passive investing, unless you could say, okay, these people are making, here's someone who's making 20 grand a month, 100 grand a month or whatever, like we do. And then you can say, that's exactly what I want. So do those three things and you should be safe. Have clearly success clearly defined in one sentence. Number two, look for a nobody mountain, somebody that would just decimate, annihilate any competition. And number three, outcomes that you want. So, how you want things to run, Joe talked about this. We want to have people with remarkable hustle. You should look at your team and you should say, a stranger should say to you, we always say this with all of our heroes, everyone I work with, we're building the world's largest organization of special needs business owners and real estate investors. We have all kinds of different projects we work on around real estate. How can people apply these safe house principles to create generational wealth? And we always say one of the most important things is that people have remarkable hustle. And that means that people should, unprompted, without you saying anything, people should walk up to you and just be impressed with your work ethic, with your level of hustle. Like, wow, you really are putting in a lot of work. You really have got a great work ethic. When you pick your team and when you look at the people who are going to manage your asset, you should feel like that about them. Like, these people are really going the extra distance. Accountant updates. Joe talked about this earlier, having accountants. This is really important. It keeps your optimism up, but also keeps things in perspective. How much money you making? How much is it costing? Where are you going? Where's your equity at? If you had 5 safe houses and you're doing 10 grand a month or 10 grand a year, that's 50K a month in equity, and that you're growing that your net worth by. That's important to know. Very few people keep that in mind. Market trends and signs. You want to know exactly where to buy in which areas. And we constantly keep videos on this. We keep on top of this. Ideal tenant relationships. The relationship they have with you is just indicative of the relationship they're going to have with their tenant. So it should be good. It should be tight. Repairs that are done for the long term. Velocity accelerated pays downs. This is where we do our finance, our safe house financing, where we sit down with you, your credit, your income, and try to figure out the fastest way to pay down to have the most amount of equity. And last, get a team with all necessary context. Remember that we have who should be on your team: realtors, lenders, property managers, hard money lenders, appraisers, contractors, investors. Then we have those are primary, secondary title companies, insurance, people, inspectors, accountants, eviction attorneys. If you want to list these people, go to bigria.com/people. You can get a list of all the people that you'll ever need to build your business. But you need to have a team of people that can provide a list like this. They can get you in touch with all these people. So when you're working with a good manager, they've got these people that can handle that for you. And if that is the case, you should be just fine having a property out of the state, out of the country, if you follow these steps. Make sure they exemplify these items, that they can help you get in touch with these people. And I think you should be good. What do you think, Joe?
Sounds great.
Good. Okay, so that's it, guys. Go to the link below, apply to be our GRS hero, and help turn 200K into 100K passive forever. 200K into 100K a year passive forever. All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.